Have you ever noticed how silence can make people feel uncomfortable almost instantly? Two people are sitting together, the conversation stops for a few seconds, and suddenly there's this invisible pressure to fill the space. Someone grabs their phone, says something random, laughs nervously, anything to break the silence. It's strange because silence isn't dangerous, it isn't painful, and yet for many people it feels deeply uncomfortable. But that discomfort isn't random. Silence forces people to face something most of them spend their lives trying to avoid, and once you understand what that is, the way you see silence changes completely. Most people think silence feels awkward because nothing is happening, but the truth is that silence feels uncomfortable because too much starts happening internally. When the noise stops, your mind becomes louder. Without conversation, music, notifications, or distractions, your attention turns inward. Thoughts that were buried under constant stimulation begin to surface. Worries, insecurities, unresolved emotions, doubts, all the things people can avoid during noise suddenly become harder to ignore. Silence creates space, and in that space, the mind starts revealing what distraction was hiding. This is one of the biggest psychological reasons silence feels uncomfortable. Modern life is built around constant stimulation. People are almost never alone with their thoughts anymore. There's always something to watch, listen to, scroll through, or react to. Over time, the brain becomes dependent on that constant input. Noise becomes normal, and silence becomes unfamiliar. And because the brain often interprets unfamiliar experiences as threatening, silence can trigger uneasiness, even when there is no real danger. The discomfort comes not from silence itself, but from what silence removes. Another reason silence feels so intense is because humans are deeply social beings, and conversation acts as a signal of connection. Talking creates reassurance. It confirms that everything is okay, that the relationship is safe, that there is no tension. But when silence appears, especially in social situations, the brain begins searching for meaning. It asks questions like, did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Is this awkward? The silence becomes loaded with interpretation. And because the human mind tends to assume the worst in uncertain situations, that empty space quickly fills with anxiety. This is why even a few seconds of silence during a conversation can feel emotionally heavy. It's not because silence is negative. It's because the brain hates ambiguity. When people stop talking, the mind rushes to explain why, and that interpretation is often shaped by insecurity. Silence becomes a mirror reflecting social fears back at us. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of saying the wrong thing. All of it becomes more visible when words disappear. Silence is also uncomfortable because it removes distraction from self-awareness. Most people are far more distracted than they realize. They move from task to task, screen to screen, conversation to conversation, rarely pausing long enough to notice what they actually feel. Silence interrupts that flow. It creates a moment where there is nothing external to focus on, and that forces attention inward. For some people, that inward awareness brings peace. But for many others, it brings discomfort because they are confronted by emotions they haven't processed. This is why silence can make loneliness feel louder. It can make anxiety feel sharper. It can make sadness feel more present. These emotions were already there, but noise was covering them. Silence removes that cover. And for people who rely heavily on external stimulation, that can feel overwhelming. It's not the silence they fear. It's what silence reveals. There is also an important social conditioning aspect to this. Many people grow up learning that silence in conversation is awkward and should be avoided. They are taught, directly or indirectly, that pauses mean something is wrong. So they learn to fill every gap with words, even meaningless words, just to reduce the tension. Over time, this creates an automatic discomfort around silence. The brain associates pauses with social risk, and the urge to fill the silence becomes almost reflexive. But here's where silence becomes psychologically powerful. The same reason silence makes people uncomfortable is the reason it reveals emotional strength. People who are comfortable in silence are often more comfortable with themselves. They don't need constant noise to avoid their thoughts. They don't need constant conversation to feel socially secure. They can sit in the absence of stimulation without interpreting it as danger. And that creates a kind of calm presence that others notice immediately. This is also why silence can feel so powerful in social situations. The person who is comfortable with silence often appears more confident, more grounded, and less emotionally reactive. Not because they're doing anything dramatic, but because they are not rushing to escape the discomfort that others feel. Silence reveals who needs reassurance and who does not. The truth is that silence exposes the relationship people have with their own minds. If someone feels anxious in silence, It often means they're uncomfortable with what comes up when external noise disappears. If someone constantly fills silence with words, it may be because empty space feels emotionally unsafe. And if someone can rest in silence calmly, it often reflects inner stability. This doesn't mean silence is easy. In a world built on distraction, silence can feel intense at first, but that intensity is exactly what makes it valuable. Silence gives people access to thoughts and feelings they usually outrun. It slows down the constant flood of stimulation and creates room for awareness. And while that can be uncomfortable, it's also where clarity begins. The irony is that the thing people avoid because it feels uncomfortable is often the thing they need most. Silence can reveal unresolved stress, hidden fears, emotional dependence on stimulation, and a need for external validation. But once those things become visible, they can finally be understood. That's why silence isn't emptiness. Silence is exposure. And the more comfortable you become with silence, the less power distraction has over you. You begin to notice your thoughts without being controlled by them. You become less dependent on noise to feel okay. You stop interpreting every quiet moment as something that needs to be fixed. And in that process, silence changes from something uncomfortable into something freeing. If this video changed the way you think about silence, take a moment to like it so more people can understand what silence is really revealing. Subscribe to the channel for more psychology-based insights about behavior, emotions, and the hidden patterns that shape the way we think. And in the comments, tell me this. Do you find silence calming or uncomfortable? The answer might reveal more than you think. I'll see you in the next video.